Okay, the next story here is this is an old one. We know that with Giga Mexico being in board, Tesla's been asking its Chinese suppliers to set up around Giga Mexico. We've already reported in the past that there's at least 21 companies that have raised billions of dollars to create factories around the Giga Mexico. Many of them are Chinese suppliers. And so this new news here is just simply saying that three executives with Chinese car parts companies, they told this Chinese newspaper outlet that they were invited by Tesla to build factories in Mexico. It's a win-win scenario. Very interesting. What do you think, Jeff? I mean, this is all right in line with you. You know quite a bit about the supply chain. They're probably giving them lots of incentive in wanting to move forward, right?
I don't know about that. I actually think the incentives are this is how Tesla is going to claw back cost reductions in current quarter, and I think in Q4 is they're going to tell these suppliers, look, first off, I don't think it's only Chinese suppliers. I think it's U.S. suppliers. In fact, the U.S. suppliers would be a much more natural fit to set up an operation in Mexico than Chinese suppliers coming over to Mexico. Not that it's unheard of. It's happened. It's happened in the last decade, but for decades prior, U.S. companies and Canadian companies were the ones setting up manufacturing in Mexico. So I actually think those companies are in a beauty contest right now. They're competing against each other for the right to set up and how much capacity they're going to be awarded. Tesla's got to give them an early indication of what's the annual run rate and what share do we think we're going to offer you. And all these different things are little bars or hurdles. So first off, the first hurdle is can I be invited to Mexico to set up an operation? Boom, that's one thing. Okay, what are you going to give me in the current quarter? That's what Tesla should be asking these companies. What can you give me right now in the Model Y? What can you give me on the 3? I need price reductions. I'm going to give you this in the future. You're going to get it. I'm good for it. I've been good for it the last 3 years. This is how Tesla should be talking to these suppliers. Everything I've asked for, I've actually taken, and I've actually taken more. So I think there's a bar to just be invited to be a supplier for Tesla in the Mexico facility, because it's going to be a very big facility. The next bar is how much share am I going to get as a supplier? So Tesla's not going to single source with any of these major commodities down there. They're going to have two sources come down. They're going to have them competing with each other endlessly. So now you're going to have two suppliers. You may have three suppliers most likely. And in that situation, you'd want to do something like a 40-30 or 40-40 and a 20, or a 45-45 and a 10% share award. So you have a third player in the mix that is given some incentives to get down there to build. Again, not that Tesla's giving them money, but they're more incenting them on share. And maybe they can move up from being a minority share to a majority share. And that's what you want. You want that third supplier or second supplier that can be hungry to move from minority share to majority share. So there's actually a lot going on here. I think there's a number of hurdles that Tesla can set up to not only get concessions from these suppliers to participate in Mexico, but also give them real-time reductions on 3 and Y and even S and X right now. So that's what I would be doing if I were in the Tesla supply chain, and knowing the people that are running these operations. I'm confident that they're gaining significant leverage by doing this. This is a great position to be in, because sometimes it's difficult to go into conversations with suppliers, especially if your product line's not doing well. Let's say you're the Ford supply chain. You have to go in and talk about the F-150. You have to talk about the Mach-E, and you have 100 days of inventory when you plan to have 50. And you have all these factory changeovers, and you're taking your costs down. So the Tesla supply chain is in a highly levered position with these suppliers. So I hope I believe that they're getting great leverage for 3 and Y now. And I think then this conversation will move to when they're setting up those factories. Now they're going to be having conversations about the bot and doing supplier awards on the bot. So it's just for Tesla, it's one thing after another. I think from a portfolio perspective, they've really set their supply chain up very well to do well with their supply. And the suppliers aren't just they're not getting screwed here. They're getting a lot of business. They get the work on the number one model in the auto business.
and it's going to be a massive factory. So while we have not yet heard that there's a groundbreaking for Giga Nuevo Leon, it's still kind of delayed at this point. It's now August. You can see continued discussions. You can see suppliers being contacted, and they're all moving forward. So a lot of these things are still moving, despite the fact that it hasn't been, officially launched. So I'm still pretty hopeful at this point that it's still going to launch in the Q4 of next year rather than Q1 of 2025. We'll see if we hear more about that.
And if I'm Tesla, I tell suppliers, don't worry about the groundbreaking schedule. I want you on time. I want you running. I want you at cost. I want you at quality. And if for whatever reason my factory down there isn't working, I'll send your parts up to Texas.
Yeah, exactly. Good point. Okay, last story of the day here is 4 in 10 U.S. adults. A most recent survey that 4 in 10 say next vehicle may be electric. So this article is positioning this as a negative, saying that only 4 in 10, not many, are not yet sold and going electric. And then they did confirm that 8% say that they or someone in their household owns or leases an electric vehicle, which is in line with the actual statistics. But only 19% say it's that they are very or extremely likely they would purchase an EV the next time they buy a car. 22% say it's somewhat likely that they will. So if you add them up, that's 22 plus 20, 40%. That's 5% higher from last year, but it just means that many still aren't quite there yet. You had a very good point about this, Jeff. Go ahead and share that with us.
All of those numbers are good because right now, 7 or 8 in 100 people today are actually buying an EV in the US. So in those stats, if it gets somewhere in the 20, if that's in the 20, that's the next generation of buyers. You're talking about tripling the current EV adoption rate in the US, which would be gigantic. If it goes to 40%, that's a 6x over where we're at today. So any one of those numbers is good. So that article was from it was from the Q2 timeframe, and they continue to do these surveys. And by the way, there's this thing going on in the media right now where, again, it's not going well for Big Auto. They're not doing well with their EV offerings. They're too high priced. They can't move on the MSRPs, or they lose too much money. They give hundreds of millions of dollars to these news outlets, CNBC, NBC Universal, Yahoo. Hundreds of millions of dollars go from Ford, GM, Stellantis to these companies for ad revenue buy. So they're trying to put a message out there that EVs aren't so great. Just wait. There'll be better EVs basically in a couple of years when we're better at our cost structure. Meanwhile, Tesla is building their equivalent Model Y vehicle. They have a $47,000 offering. That's $40,000 with the tax credit. And the Cadillac Lyriq's in the 60s, the Polestar's in the $80,000 range. And that's where they're at right now from a cost structure perspective. So this is how this all plays together. But that stat is a very encouraging stat when you're only at 7% adoption today.